For the next few weeks, I'm going to give you some key points to help you conquer the giants in your life. This series, we'll call it Conquering Giants. I know all about troubling, huge, and seemingly impossible giants that I have had to conquer in my lifetime. Despite God always being faithful in helping me to victory when facing these giants, I still get that dry mouth, horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach when I face new giants. Sometimes I think, God, you have done so many miracles in my life, so why can't I ever get to a place where I have enough faith that giant-sized problems that come into my heart don't wreck my life? That's when I realize I must get this in my psyche. God loves me and He knows what is happening on my battlefield. And I can only conquer my giants when God is working through me. I simply cannot win the battle on my own. So, first and foremost, we must understand this great truth. If you are an obedient child of God, the battle is not yours, the battle belongs to the Lord. In 1 Chronicles 20 and 15, it says, The Lord says to you, Be not afraid or dismayed at this great multitude. Multitude of what? Of giants. For the battle is not yours, but God's. Throughout the pages of the Bible, we find remarkable, phenomenal, divine interventions by God into the affairs of men. But here's the challenge. If you want to see the miraculous miracles of God, first you must see God leading you into valleys full of giants with big problems and overwhelming odds in order for Him to show Himself strong on your behalf to deliver you. I'm going to give you an example. There was a valley in the Promised Land that the Israelites called the Land of Giants or the Valley of Giants. It was a frightening place because giants still lived there, even after Israel took control of the land. You can see it up there on the left side of the slide. The Valley of Giants represented a land of tremendous opportunities for giant-sized blessings, just as our valleys do today. However, too many times, if we cower down before our problems, we will miss the blessings that we could have had experiencing God in the Valley of Giants. So instead of fearing the giants, our motto should be the same as Captain Kirk of Star Trek fame, who said, Our mission is to boldly go where no one has ever gone before. Even if we can't say it out loud, it still needs to be the attitude of our hearts. Let's go ahead and say it out loud. To boldly go where no one has ever gone before. When the children of Israel arrived at the border of the land of promise, Moses sent 12 spies into the land of Canaan, who came back not with just a good report, but with an enormous bunch of grapes that took 2 men to carry as proof the land was good. And it was a land that flowed with milk and honey, which meant it was a land of abundance. The spies showed the people the fruit and said, Look how big these grapes are. They're ginormous. The Bible says, Then they came to the valley of Eshcol, and there cut down a branch with one cluster of grapes. They carried it between 2 of them, on a pole. The Israelites enthusiastically responded, Awesome! Let's go take the land that was promised to us by God. But as always, then came the bad news. How many times in your life are you afraid to enjoy the good news because you're afraid of the bad news that's sure to follow? The pastor stood before the congregation and said, I have bad news, I have good news, and I have more bad news. The congregation got quiet. The pastor said, The bad news is the church needs a new roof. The congregation groaned. The pastor went on. The good news is we have enough money for the new roof. A sigh of relief was heard rippling through the gathered group. Finally, the pastor said, The bad news is the money is still in your pockets. Numbers 13:33. We saw the Nephilim giants there. We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we look the same to them. Joshua and Caleb said, We can take these giants, but the other 10 spies said in unison, Houston, we have a problem. There are giants between us and the huge fruit and the blessings. And then they said something that doomed them. We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we look the same to them. Notice they were grasshoppers in their own eyes, and then once they were in their own eyes, then they looked the same to those giants. This is what we call grasshopper mentality, and still affects many believers today. Have you noticed that other people's problems never seem as challenging as your own? No matter what anyone else is going through, their problems seem insignificant to what you're going through. In our view of troubles, our problems always seem bigger, meaner, messier, and more impossible than anyone else's. When you talk to other people, you feel brave and confident. If you were in their shoes, you could slay their giants in a matter of minutes. However, when you look at your own problems, your knees quiver, your heart races, and your courage flees. Why is that? Well, here's the reason. When we are in the valley of giants, we tend to lose perspective. Our eyes become fixated on our giant problems and challenges, and before we know it, we lose sight of just how big our God really is in comparison to the giants of trouble that we find ourselves in. The two spies, Joshua and Caleb, they chose to keep their eyes on the Lord, not on the giants. They were looking for a solution to the problem rather than just looking at the problem itself. Their perspective was quite different from the perspective of the rest of Israel. Here is what they said: "Do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will swallow them up. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them." So the first lesson to be learned in the Valley of the Giants is, in times of trouble, magnify the Lord. Psalms 34:3 says, "Magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together." The word magnify means to enlarge or expand. Does focusing on the Lord and praising him make him any bigger than he already is? Of course not. God is God. He's not going to get any bigger, whether we praise him or not. It is like putting on reading glasses. It doesn't make the words on the page any bigger, but you can see them better when the words are magnified. That's what happens when we praise God. Our perspective changes. When we focus on our problems, we make them bigger than they really are, and we develop a grasshopper mentality. But when we focus on God, our problems shrink, and like Joshua and Caleb, we begin to believe that we can overcome them. We will overcome them because he, Almighty God, has already overcome. Some of you have been promised great things in life by God: a great marriage, a great business, a great career, a great ministry, but has not come to fulfillment yet because there are enemies that refuse to acknowledge that they are subject to God. These enemies may be remnants of your past that you should have dealt with long ago, but for some reason or another, you have allowed them to linger. You keep reliving them over and over. But let us obey the scripture. Magnify the Lord, exalt his name, and forget the past. Psalms 34:3 again. "Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together." Most people do not defeat the enemy or their past. They simply try to contain it. Or in other words, they try to keep it buried just below the surface, and that's not good. Do you know why they bury a body at least 6 feet under the ground? That depth was decided on eons ago because mankind calculated that at that depth no wild animals could ever be able to dig it up. If you want to be totally rid of a problem, you must give it to Jesus Christ and let him cover it with his blood and bury it in the sea of forgetfulness. This was the problem with the Israelites. Even after they entered the promised land, they never did completely drive out the enemy, and they were forever bothered by the very ones that God told them to totally destroy. Joshua 17:13, when the children of Israel had grown strong, they put the Canaanites to forced labor, and they didn't utterly drive them out. That was a huge mistake. Can you imagine what their lives would have been like if they would have just obeyed God and completely annihilated the enemy? This process is still going on today. Israel will fight with Hezbollah or Hamas or the Syrians only until the world opinion dictates the truth and the age-old problem continues to exist. So many people get to the brink of victory, subdue the enemy, and think everything is fine. Instead, you need to defeat and kill the enemy totally. Ask yourself, what would total commitment to the Bible look like in my life? Or better still, what would you look like? How would you need to change to be totally committed to God in the Bible? What could God accomplish in you if you obeyed the commands? Now hear this. Compromise is corruption in the land of promise. If you leave one cancer cell, the body remains in danger. Doctors and scientists now know that each cancer starts with changes in one cell or a small group of cells. Usually there are many years before you can feel the lump or a doctor can see it on a scan. Many times the cells have started to divide and reproduce uncontrollably before they are arrested and removed. Likewise, sin always starts with one act of disobedience to God's word. If you willingly indulge in any sin habits or refuse to line up to God's word, you threaten your own God-given promises. Therefore, you have to nip sin in the bud. We must stop doing things that are wrong before they become a bigger problem. But here's what most people do. They argue, complain, and accuse others rather than taking the responsibility for their own problems. We have this example in the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. They did what most believers do. They begin to complain and blame the leader because they didn't get their fair share of the land. Let me just ask you, please, whatever you do, don't do this. Don't play the blame game. Joshua 17:14, the people of Joseph said to Joshua, why have you given us only one allotment and one portion of an inheritance? We are a numerous people and the Lord has blessed us abundantly. When in the valley, it's easy to blame everybody else, even God, for not giving you enough. I don't have a good enough husband or a good enough job or a good enough amount of money or a good enough house. However, Joshua would have none of it. He put the responsibility right back on them. In so many words, he said, don't blame, claim. Claim what is rightfully yours. If you are so numerous, and if the hill country of Ephraim is too small for you, go up into the forest and clear the land for yourself. There in the land of the Perizzites and the Rephites, those are giants. They were filled with giants. So in other words, Joshua was saying to them, quit belly aching to me and everybody around you and go up the hill to the valley of the giants and clear land and destroy the giants. Enjoy the land for yourselves. If you want the blessings of being a child of God, you will have to take up the responsibilities of what we have taught for so many times, the disciples' cross. Remember that? Sometimes the issue is not that we lack and need more. In fact, what we require might be there all the time. Right under your nose. It's called your mouth, and just inside of your lips is your tongue. Did you know that life and death is in the power of the tongue? So quit murmuring and complaining and start magnifying the Lord and take back what the giants have stolen from you. When the going gets rough in the valley of the giants, it's easier to ask God for a different valley than to clear the valley you already live in. There may be nothing wrong with the land God has given to you, but you need to get busy and stake your claim for God. Helen Keller said, be happy with what you have while working for what you want. However, we would rather pray for a financial miracle than to have it actually work hard at the job that God has provided for us. It may seem easier to find a new spouse than to work with the one you already have, but as a fine elderly Christian woman about to celebrate her 50th wedding anniversary, she said, better the devil you know than the devil you don't know. That's good advice. God grows us into our destiny, and there are never any shortcuts. In fact, shortcuts will destroy you. Ask anyone that has won the lottery what shape their life was in after they had won millions of dollars that they were not prepared to handle. back to the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. Joshua responded, "Since there are so many of you and you find the hill country of Ephraim to be confining, climb into the forest and clear ground there for yourselves in the land of the Perizzites and the Rephaim." The people of Joshua replied, "The hill country is not enough for us, and all the Canaanites who live in the plain have chariots filled with iron, both those in Beth Sham and its settlements, and those in the valley of Jezreel." Joshua said to the family of Joseph, to Ephraim and Manasseh, "Yes, there are a lot of you, and you are very strong. One lot is not enough for you. You also get the hill country. It's nothing but trees now, but you will clear the land and make it your own from one end to the other. The powerful Canaanites, even with their iron chariots, won't stand a chance against you." Joshua had not changed. When he was young, he believed God was bigger than the giants, and now he was an old man, he was more convinced of it than ever. Many of you need to hear Joshua's words of wisdom and experience when he says that we need the faith that moves forward. The choice is ours. Like unbelieving Israel, we can magnify our problems, we can compromise with the enemy, and live short of our destiny. Or like Joshua and Caleb, we can magnify the Lord and discover that nothing is too difficult for God. There was another Israelite who faced a giant in the valley, and his name was David. And while the rest of the army ran from Goliath, the 9-foot tall man who defied God in the valley day after day, David ran straight at him. His brothers said, "That giant is too big." David said, "Yeah, he's too big to miss." Then David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword and a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you, and I will take your head from you. And then I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel, and everyone will know that the Lord does not need weapons to rescue his people. It is his battle and not ours. The Lord will give you to us." Isn't that powerful? Goliath moved closer to attack. David quickly ran out to meet him. Reaching into his shepherd's bag and taking out a stone, he hurled it from his sling and hit the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank in, and Goliath stumbled and fell face down to the ground. Now, what is significant about the 5 stones in the shepherd's bag? Well, it could have stood for the 5 initials JESUS, or more likely the fact that Goliath had 4 brothers, and if they wanted to rise up against David, he would give them the dose of the same thing he gave to Goliath. So David prevailed, triumphed over the Philistine giant with a sling and with a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. There was no sword in the hand of David. Then David ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword, drew it out his sheath, and killed him and cut off his head. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they ran for their lives. When was the last time you ran toward a giant as David did? When was the last time you looked your biggest problem right in the eye and declared that it would be defeated in the name of the Lord? David's words were inspiring and his courage contagious. Big problems, however, do not simply run away in fear because we have a momentary blast of courage and speak the word of God with boldness. Goliath was not intimidated one bit. The words had no effect on the Philistine as far as we can tell. If David had not followed his words with actions, he would have been no better off than the rest of Saul's army. If he had just shouted at Goliath and ran away, nothing would have changed. If you feel faith rising up in you to speak to your giants, don't let it end there. The Bible says David charged Goliath. And as soon as you declare war on the giants in your valley, the devil will turn around and charge you. But David charged him right back. That's what we have to do. Speak to your giants. God has given you the authority to speak the word. Then charge them in the name of Jesus and defeat them. Hit them with the chief cornerstone that the builders rejected. Cut off the head of the devil in the name of Jesus with the sword of the Lord. No giant has the right to defy God in your life. No giant of the past sin or hurts or wrongs that you have suffered. You will surely encounter giants, but as my daddy used to say, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Sometimes God will put Goliath in your life for you to find the David that's in you. David didn't need to know Goliath's strength because he already knew God's. No matter what kind of valley we go through, there are practical steps that we can take so that we do not succumb to fear and short circuit God's ultimate plan for us. This is the actual valley of Elah today, where Goliath and David had their showdown. We'll use the setting of this valley for some practical traps to avoid in the valley. First of all, don't pretend you are not in that valley. Pretending you're not in the valley is the Clint Eastwood approach. You know, when the going gets tough, we get macho, bite the bullet, ignore the hurt, pretend the valley doesn't exist. Some people do this in the name of faith, believing that to confess failure, depression, or pain is to strengthen the enemy. That is not what the Bible teaches. Every emotion and every experience in life is expressed in the book of Psalms. High times, low times, times of wanting to die, times of celebration, times of mourning, they're all expressed in the book of Psalms. Occasionally, David gets angry with God. Other times, he gets so mad at his enemies, he tells God to kill them. So, ignoring your pain will never get you through the valley. David confesses in Psalms 39:2, but when I was silent and still, not even saying anything good, my anguish increased. My heart grew hot within me, and as I meditated, the fire burned. In other words, when he tried to tough it out by saying and doing nothing, he just grew more and more angry. He boiled on the inside. Stewing on the inside will make your anger boil. Pretending we are okay when we're not is not faith. It is a recipe for disaster. You need to be honest about that, what you're going through. If it is a sin we are dealing with, we need to find a trusted friend or pastor and discuss it with them. Confession is good for the soul. Apostle James said, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The earnest prayer of a righteous person has great power and produces wonderful results. Bad things happen when good people pretend nothing is wrong. Pretending nothing is wrong does not make the valley go away. It simply results in procrastination. At best, postponing the pain that eventually must be faced. Giants do not go away because we pretend they are not there, and delay typically only allows them to grow larger. Ironically, then, the prideful approach can cause fear to grow. Fear keeps us from doing the things we know will help us. We know we should see a marriage counselor, but we try to tough it out until our marriage is almost gone. Pain is like a warning light on a car dashboard. If the temperature light comes on, you know your car might be in danger of overheating. But what do most people do? They drive on, pretending there's no problem. Maybe they put a piece of masking tape over the light. That will not do anything about your problem. It only gets worse. Drugs, drinking, promiscuity are masking tapes over the solution. Avoidance, pain avoidance techniques. C.S. Lewis, the great British writer, said, God whispers to us in our pleasure, but he speaks to us in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. Next, we need to don't try to escape the valley. Trying to escape the valley is the Barney Fight approach. Why face a problem we can run from? Perhaps if we get far enough away, we will never have to face it. Some people think changing jobs or moving to a new area will result in a fresh approach. Running from our problems, however, never helps. We hide out, we run away, only to find later the problem has not gone away. It just followed us to our new hideout. Because when we get there, it's still us that's there. David was tempted to try this approach, but when he was going through an especially scary time, my heart is in anguish within me. The terrors of death assail me. Fear and trembling have beset me. Horror has overwhelmed me. Did the great men of God simply rebuke the fear and take a stand for God? Well, yes, but not before fantasizing about escaping. If only I had wings like a dove, I would fly away and reside in safety. Look, I would flee far away. I would lodge in the wilderness. I would hurry to a place of shelter, away from the raging wind, away from the storm. You see, it's human nature to panic, cut, and run. Building and fire codes insist on such precautions in case of emergencies. All the doors have to have them installed. What kind? What do they put on the doors? They call panic hardware. People in panic can go into extreme to escape their situation. After many years of apparent stability, they may leave their families, their church, or even their country. Suicide is a radical attempt to escape, although it simply results in leaving our problems to others, often those we love the most, and we're hoping to help by our final action. Next, don't be afraid in the valley. Although David, like all of us, had an instinctive reaction of fear and a desire to escape from his troubles, he knew that was the wrong approach. An instinctive reaction of fear is a threatening situation does not disqualify us as people of faith. It simply means we're human. David overcome his fear and desired to flee, and instead he decided to declare faith. As for me, I will call to God, and the Lord saves me. Cast your cares on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be forsaken. Next of all, we need to learn to rest in the valley. Fear can stall our engines, freeze us in the headlights, and even cause us to retreat. It is clearly one of the enemy's most successful and often used devices to stop us. But when we remember that God is with us, even in the valley, there is nothing in this life to be afraid of. Not death, not divorce, not business failure, not rebellious kids, not anything your imagination can conjure up. Like David, Paul faced his share of life-threatening valleys. He said, "We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers, about the hardship we suffered in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired even of life. Indeed, in our hearts we felt the sentence of death, but this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead. He has delivered us from such a deadly peril, and he will deliver us. On him we have set our hope, and we will continue to deliver us. For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. But if I live on in the flesh, this will mean fruit for my labor. Yet what shall I choose? I cannot tell, for I am hard pressed between the two, having a desire to depart and be with Christ, which is far better. Nevertheless, I remain in the flesh, because it is more needful for you." I read this story the other day about a wonderful couple that was very active in their church. He was an assistant pastor and his wife was a church secretary. One night when leaving for church, the dad accidentally ran over his son Danny while backing out of their driveway. Danny had been at the next door neighbor's house, and seeing his dad through the window, he had come running across the yard and driveway to say goodbye to his daddy at precisely the wrong time. He raced Danny to the emergency room at the hospital. They called the pastor. They prayed fervently. Their hearts ached. They cried and shouted and believed God to perform a miracle. But only a few hours later, Danny died. The parents were crushed. The whole church was deflated and emotionally exhausted, wondering where God was in the whole ordeal. Everybody formed hundreds of questions in their minds, and they all started with the word, why? Why would God take Danny? Why would he allow him to run out to the car? Why? Frankly, folks, some things that happen to us just do not have an answer. The pastor was asked to perform Danny's funeral, but he did not have a clue what he was going to say. This was not the usual funeral, and no one sermon could work here. The pastor said the situation hadn't even made him angry with God. The night before the funeral, he was still frustrated, confused. He decided to take a walk. He looked up in the sky and said, "God, if you don't give me a word, I'll stand up at that pulpit tomorrow and I'll say, 'Folks, I don't have a clue what to say,' and I'll sit down." He meant it. He was not going to simply go through the motions. Then he began to complain to God. "It isn't fair. Why did this have to happen to them? The parents were sincere believers who had dedicated their lives to serving you and seemed to be living as perfect life as they could. He said to God, he said, is this how they are to be repaid for their labor? One sudden and unexpected incident that had messed up their whole life? Sure, there had been many wonderful times with Danny, but from here on they would have to look at the past through tragedy-colored glasses. Then the pastor said what happened next stands as one of the most significant experiences of his life. God gave him a vision as he looked up into the sky. He saw the face of Jesus, and Jesus wore this funny expression, the kind a parent gets when a child is throwing a temper tantrum over not getting a cookie. But the parent knows full well there are cookies in the cupboard, but still he watches him throw that tantrum. The pastor said it even made him angrier. He thought, I don't want to be patronized. He thought, if you have to have power to do something, why in the world don't you do it? The Lord looked at him with loving eyes and said, is that all you have to say? Are you through with your temper tantrum? The pastor resigned himself and said, yeah, I'm through. I have nothing else. And the Lord said to him, so you're mad because something that takes place in a moment can change everything forever? The pastor said, that's right. Why couldn't this have happened to somebody else? I would not wish it on my greatest enemy, but if it had to happen to anyone, why would it have to happen to why could it happen to some jerks I know? Why did it have to happen to a good couple that was simply trying to do nothing but serve you? And the Lord said, you think this moment has messed up everything. You suppose things will never be the same again. And then he said, do you want to see a moment that is going to change all other moments? With that, his expression changed, and a beautiful smile came on his face. He held up his hand, snapped his fingers, and as it would in a movie, the sky behind him was rolled away. The heavens parted, and there were countless numbers of angels and saints clothed in white, including Danny. They had the most beautiful expression on their faces. As sad as the parents were, that is how happy the angels were to include Danny in their choir. The Lord said, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, we shall be changed. That was all he said, but the message was communicated. Miracles can happen as suddenly as tragedies, and the time will come, perhaps when we least expect it, when in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, everything will change. And as quickly as those tragic moments change our lives, we shall be changed forever when the trumpet sounds and the dead in Christ shall rise, and we shall be caught up to be with the Lord in the air. As the old song says, we'll understand it better by and by. Here is the second verse of that song. It says, we are often destitute of the things that life demands, one of food and one of shelter, thirsty hills and barren lands. We are trusting in the Lord, and according to God's word, we will understand it better by and by. By and by, when the morning comes, when the saints of God are gathered home, we'll tell the story how we've overcome, for we'll understand it better by and by. There's verses 3 and 4 that says, trials dark on every hand, we cannot understand. All the ways of God would lead us to that blessed promised land. But he'll guide us with his eye, and we'll follow till we die, for we'll understand it better by and by. Verse 4, temptations, hidden snares often take us unawares, but our hearts are made to bleed for a thoughtless word or deed. And we wonder why the test when we try to do our best, but we'll understand it better by and by. Well, God bless you today. Next week, we're going to continue this message with defeating your giants. Hope you can put this on your calendar to meet us here. God bless you, and that's my message for today. I hope you enjoyed today's lesson and it has been a blessing to you. I'm Michael Hopper, pastor of Victory Tabernacle Community Church in Fresno, California. Our congregation meets every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. If you would like to attend one of our services, please call me at 559-575-2984 for directions. Also, if you would like more information, you can visit us on our website at www.thetabernacle.com. If you would like to help support this online ministry financially, there is a Give button on our website. God bless you and keep you, make His face shine upon you, and give you peace.